But here we are, 1984, the beginning of UTP and the acceptance for data. It was distrusted from the data person because the voice person was like, this is great, I can be in charge of the wire. And as AT&T and the regional Bell operating companies knew, when they own the wire, the company that owns the wire owns the customer, right? Well, Judge Green had some choices to make there, and he deregulated inside wire, and we started to see the birth of UTP. Now, back in this day, each computer system had a different cable. You have to understand, there was a rich copper complement of cables accommodating connectivity to all these computers. Matter of fact, there was multiple terminals on the worker's desktop. Let me give you an illustration. There was IBM 3270 had RG62 coax. Apple Talk had RJ11 silver satin. You remember the MMJ the DEC system had? That was a really weird RJ type connector. MMJ. We had thick wire Ethernet with vampire taps and a bus topology. The bus, star, and ring topologies really were very common back then. Most things now are in a star topology. However, we had systems like Wang. We had a TNC and BNC that we pulled, 2 coaxial cables. We had system 3638 with a twin-ax cable. There was a variety of different complements of cable, and everything was home run. There was no faceplates. There was no patch cords. Everything was home run from the data terminal equipment to the data communications equipment, typically down in a data center. So this practice changed with UTP, and the RCDD was the one in charge of designing the infrastructure. As a matter of fact, you'll see one of my first jobs at Citicorp in 1984. I took this photo of the IDF, and you see there was no real place for it, so we put it in the copy room. Plywood, backboard, horizontal cable, and there was no patch panels back in the day. Our products certainly have evolved from back then. We terminated everything on a 66 block. There was no faceplates, no patch cords, no patch panels, but there was the Balin, and there was the UTP acceptance starting really in 84 through 87. And there was no standards either. The standards came a bit later. I was talking with TIA last night, and actually Dan Morris was there, and I asked, when did the standards start, the 5.6X series? And Dan whips out his Storm and pumps it in, pulls it up. 91, that easy, that much information right at your fingertips. Thanks for that information, Dan. But back then we had the acronyms were, well, the IDF was, intermediate distribution frame. But back then we had a thing, we had our own language for IT. That was job security. We had a thing, I remember learning the acronyms, and I love acronyms, but I remember distinctly we would say, when the computers froze and nothing worked, we would say, I think we have to IPL the CPU. Does anybody know what IPL the CPU means? It's a pretty fancy acronym. Initialize the program load for the central processing unit. You know what that means? Actually, that means that you have to call somebody up who's very sophisticated, gets a lot of money. They come in, they look at the mainframe, they look at the console, which is now frozen. The entire network is down. And they have to IPL the CPU. It's a very sophisticated way of saying you've got to turn the computer off and back on again. I have to call people up in the middle of the night working graveyard shift and say, you got to come in, it's time to IPL the CPU. It was great. It was great. Well, from there, I've come a long way in my acronyms. You know you're getting CECs for this, right? So let's practice a little bit of acronyms. Whenever I go on a job, I love to look at the infrastructure in a building to understand what I'm up against, So I start at the CEV. And when I understand the CEV, I know, what's in store regarding disaster, redundancy, and backup. especially in these days, it's very important. I follow that to the MPO, and I go to the extended NI, where I look for the MGE, and I find, hopefully, I find a TMGB. Maybe in the MPO, in the extended NI, I don't find a TMGB, so I have to put that in, and I now know I have to, what? Install a TBB. That costs a lot of extra money. So I want to understand what the ground system is so that I know as well what the building rule is with demarcation. And I know you all are going into these buildings and you're finding different rules of thumb. When the Department of Public Utility Commission mandated that the 12-inch rule be involved with single-tenant multi-floor buildings, it was well known that we had to extend the NI in certain cases, but with a multi-tenant building, the extended NI is a real challenge. You're very often not even thought of. One of the things that we do when we get on to projects is we always ask the question, do you need high cap circuits extended? Well, back then we were extending ground start pots, loop start circuits, and maybe a high cap T1 that was span powered. Remember the old span powered T1s? You'd be working on them, you'd touch the side of the cabinet or something, you get shocked. I can tell you, working in Wall Street, those span-powered T1s really did give you a jolt. Now we're local powering the T1s. I don't even see a lot of T1s anymore. That's a low cap circuit. You know, we're extending OC3s to OC192, 9.6 gig, to the customer prem, to the CPE, through the riser system. And very often we're doing that with conduit substructures because the riser system is so chock full, the pathway in space is so chock full of other carriers that it's hard to guarantee security. So when we look at the extended NI and we determine the building rule of thumb, very often that leads us to the Toka riser closet, or one of my favorite places I call home, the MTER, which is fantastic, chock full of connectivity there. I'm noticing a change though, because with VoIP, there's really no demarc. Like you see here, the plywood is bare. There's no voice MC. And it's all going over to the rack subsystem, where we have a lot of inter-rack connectivity with VoIP. We're seeing the demarcation, the classic demarcation on the MTER for the VMC disappear. And what does this do for fault tolerance? Well, it makes that disaster recovery and backup, diversity recovery and backup, all that much more important. My favorite component really is in the horizontal element, though, isn't it? Isn't that where all that real good stuff happens? The horizontal element is comprised of pathways and spaces, 569 stuff, that coordinating this activity on the job is a real challenge. You're looking for sources of EMI and RFI. You're looking to maximize bend radius. You're looking to make it easily accessible to demo the infrastructure out. We're actually designing, according to the NEC, demoing infrastructure out. So we're looking for methods of cable distribution. Perhaps the designer wants to use a TE, which is a very common way, or a Mutoa. You're going to throw a Mutoa out there, you've got to find them in the furniture systems. You've got to find them for connectivity. Lots of tools in the RCDD toolbox. Lots of ways to stay sharp. But certainly, my favorite is the WA. The WAO is absolutely my favorite component because that's where it happens. My worst nightmare is now unfolding. The silver lining back in the future was all those rich copper complements, all those terminals that we had on the desktop. Well, what's happening is I go on the job and I say to the IT director, what would you like in the horizontal element for your WAO? And he says, well, just give me one Cat 6. I remind him I have 4 kids to put through college. I remind him of standards say a minimum of 2. You know, the end user really drives the decision. So we pull one Cat 6. There is a silver lining in our future, however. So going forward, I want to kind of skip to the token ring Ethernet wars. And I remember the day a client came up to me, kind of glazed in his eyes, and he said to me, it wasn't too long ago actually, he said, Ed, have you installed any of this Category 7? I said, yes, I have, about 15 years ago. The token ring cabling system was a shielded cabling system. True, it operated with only 2 pairs. However, it was a bit clumsy at the time. It took up a lot of real estate in the IDFs, the future TRs. So, as we migrated with the classic token ring versus Ethernet war, we had customers who were staunch advocates of token ring, that ring topology with that token spinning around and all those funny connectors and all those mows, cows, and lambs. That was great. You had the mows, cows, and lambs. We had a lot of stuff that we had to be aware of. Deck, Delny, Demper, cows, mows, and lambs. This was a great world. Well, I can tell you from experience that over the years, my best clients have turned only into best clients after achieving excellent customer service. But I remember the classic case. I got a referral from a small account I had. They said, you got to go across town to a company called Silver, Burdette and Ginn. They want 9 drops, 9 drops. I'm on my 2nd child. I have 4 children now. I got to, feed them, clothe them, 9 drops. I said, oh, okay, we're going to do that. So I go over there and I'm introduced to the office manager. And she says she wants 9 drops. She needs them right away. And she wants to use this UTP thing. And I said, that's fine. We'll take care of that for you. We've got a new category of cable. It's category 5. Oh, I don't know what that is, but it sounds good. So, I said, while I'm here, why don't I quote you on the whole floor, which is only 50 drops. I said, we could do a structured wiring system. She didn't know what that was, and I explained it to her. Time went on, and she got pregnant. They had a facilities manager come in because she was on leave, and he said, Ed, we're gonna blow out the walls. We're gonna expand the floor. We need 250 drops. Was happy to give him a quote on 250 drops of category 5 UTP and a structured wiring topology. Did some design build work. Showed him the IDF at the time. He said, this is very Greek to me. I don't know. I'm a little nervous. I want you to go to our parent company so that you can, talk the talk, all these acronyms. I don't get it. So I said, sure, no problem. Who's your parent company? He said, Simon & Schuster. I said, I'd be happy to see them. So I made an appointment, went over the George Washington Bridge to Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey. Made an appointment with John Murphy. And I'll never forget the day that, he couldn't see me that day, so I made another appointment. Finally got in to see him. And he was waiting for me with John Goljetsky, the voice, the telecom guy. They had me in there for 3 hours grilling me on standards, codes, and regulations. I was like, wow, this is a lot of work for 250 drops, but I was happy because this was a decent-sized job for me, grilling me on all this information. And I didn't know it at the time. They were actually interviewing me for what turned out to be a multi-million-dollar account over a 19-year period. And that relationship that's grown is something that I want to encourage all of our business people, all of our business development people, and all you entrepreneurs out there who are thinking about maybe going into your own business. It's scary, but stick with it, because little things turn into big things. And John Murphy's here today, right up front. I want to thank you, John, for that relationship. Thank you. 9 drops. And we've wired many buildings, haven't we, John? Matter of fact, this is one of John's buildings right here. I'm very happy here. You see me smiling here. You'll see, actually, if you notice here, you'll see token ring is starting to go out, and you'll see the UTP conversion with I think it was maybe a synoptic switch at the time. You see the UTP starting to migrate into the STP world. This building was actually wired 4 times. We had token ring, Cat 5, and we had category 3, token ring, Cat 5, and now Cat 6.